Change is one of the most overused words in our world today, yet one of the least understood. We talk about changing our habits, our environment, our careers, or even our relationships. But the truth is, none of these things truly change until something inside us does. The kind of change that lasts, the kind that transforms, always begins from within. It starts not when we rearrange the world around us, but when we allow Allah to rearrange the world inside us, because every external breakthrough is first an internal awakening. When you begin to look inward, you realize that the battle was never between you and the world, but between you and your own thoughts. The heart becomes the battlefield where faith and fear wrestle for control, and whichever one you feed more wins. The moment you recognize that your outer circumstances are only mirrors reflecting your inner state, you begin to take responsibility for your peace instead of waiting for people or events to create it for you. That's where true transformation begins, in ownership of your soul. We live in a culture that teaches us to fix everything outside of us first. We chase validation, recognition, and success, hoping that it will fix the emptiness we feel within. But the more we achieve, the more we realize that emptiness doesn't go away through addition. It heals through alignment. When the heart aligns with its creator, it finds a satisfaction that cannot be shaken by outcomes, because what comes from the soul can never be taken by the world. Inner change is not dramatic. It's quiet, slow, and often unseen. It happens in the private corners of prayer, in the silent tears no one witnesses, and in the small choices you make when no one is watching. That hidden work, the one between you and Allah, is where the real rebuilding happens. Every act of patience, every moment of surrender, every whispered, "Ya Allah, I trust you," becomes a brick in the foundation of a transformed life. To begin this journey of inner change, you must first be honest about what's happening within you. Denial is the enemy of transformation. If you refuse to face your pain, it will rule your life in silence. But if you face it, bring it to the light of prayer, and allow Allah to reshape it, what once broke you can become what builds you. The heart cannot heal what it hides, but it can be renewed by what it reveals. The beauty of inner transformation is that it doesn't require perfection, only sincerity. You don't need to have it all together to begin. You just need to take one step inward, one step closer to Allah, and one step away from the illusion that change comes from the outside. When you focus on who you are becoming, not just what you are achieving, the world around you begins to shift in ways you never imagined. And as your heart changes, your perspective changes. You start seeing purpose in places where you once saw pain. You begin to interpret delays as divine timing instead of disappointment. You stop reacting to life and start responding with awareness. The same situations that used to drain you now shape you. Because when your inside changes, the same world feels completely different. Not because it changed, but because you did it. So when you pray for change, don't just ask Allah to change your situation. Ask Him to change your sight. Ask Him to awaken your heart, to align your will with His, and to make you the kind of person who doesn't just survive the storm, but becomes the calm within it. Because real change never begins outside. It begins within. Pain has a way of getting our attention like nothing else. It disrupts our comfort, shatters our illusions of control, and exposes the fragility of everything we thought was secure. But pain is not a divine rejection. It is a divine invitation. It calls us to pause, to reflect, and to return. Allah uses discomfort not to harm us, but to awaken us to a reality we may have ignored. Pain becomes a language through which the Creator speaks to His creation, saying, "Come back to me. There's more for you than what you're holding on to." Every test you go through carries a message meant specifically for your growth. When the heart breaks, it is not to destroy it, but to open it wider, to make more room for faith, for compassion, for light. Pain teaches dependence, humility, and surrender. It reminds us that we are not meant to carry everything alone. Sometimes Allah removes what we rely on, not to punish us, but to remind us that He is the only one truly reliable. In that remembrance, pain transforms into guidance and Diyar's Enand. The mistake we often make is assuming that if we are hurting, something has gone wrong. But the truth is, Pain is often proof that something is deeply right, that growth is happening. Just as a seed must break to become a tree, the soul must sometimes be broken to be reborn. The discomfort you feel is the evidence of transformation taking place beneath the surface. You're being stretched into the person you were meant to become, not punished for who you once were and to be and in moments of hardship. It's easy to question why Allah allows us to feel pain. But what if the pain itself is mercy in disguise? What if it's the only way for your heart to return to a softness it once had? Pain strips away pride, ego, and illusion, revealing the pure essence of who you are, a servant in need of his Lord. It humbles you in ways comfort never could. Through that humility, a new form of strength is born, one grounded not in control, but in trust, and trust in pain doesn't just shape your faith. It deepens your empathy. When you've been through darkness, you begin to recognize it in others and extend compassion more freely. What once made you bitter can now make you better because it refines the heart. The same wound that once bled begins to bleed mercy. You start to understand that your trials were never just about you. They were also about who you could help once you've healed. Every moment of pain carries an invitation to draw closer to Allah. It whispers, you are not forgotten. Because in those raw moments when the world fades and nothing seems to make sense, you are positioned perfectly to experience divine nearness. The most intimate conversations with Allah often come through tears. And in those tears, there is healing. Every drop is a prayer the heart makes when words cannot. If you look back, you will notice that the times you grew the most were rarely when life was easy. Ease may comfort you, but pain matures you. It clears away the unnecessary and reveals what truly matters. It teaches gratitude in ways prosperity never could. Every hardship becomes a mirror reflecting the strength, resilience, and faith that Allah has already placed within you. A strength you may have never discovered without the test. And when pain comes again, as it always will in this temporary life, you begin to see it differently. You stop asking, why me? And start asking, what is this teaching me? You start recognizing pain not as punishment, but as preparation. Preparation for a greater purpose, for a deeper peace, and for a closer connection with the one who never leaves. We live in a world that constantly tells us to hold on to people, to possessions, to positions, to outcomes. But the more we hold, the heavier we become. Detachment is not about indifference. It's about freedom. It's not about caring less. It's about caring rightly. When you learn to detach from what is temporary, you create space in your heart for what is eternal. You begin to understand that nothing you lose was ever truly yours, and nothing meant for you will ever pass you by. Attachment often disguises itself as love, but in reality, it can become a form of worship. When you tie your peace to something that can leave, you set yourself up for heartbreak. Allah wants your heart whole, not divided between Him and what fades. Detachment is the process of untangling your worth from worldly things. It's learning to love deeply without clinging, to give generously without expecting, and to walk faithfully without needing to control. Everything in this world is designed to teach you how to let go. People come and go. Seasons change. Wealth increases and decreases. Health rises and falls. Every fluctuation is a reminder that permanence belongs only to Allah. The heart that clings to what is fleeting lives in constant fear of loss, but the heart that clings to Allah lives in constant peace. Detachment doesn't remove emotion, it removes illusion. The illusion that anything other than Allah can sustain you. Detaching is one of the hardest spiritual disciplines because it requires you to trust unseen promises over visible realities. It means loosening your grip on the things that give you a sense of control and surrendering that control to the one who never fails. You stop trying to own outcomes and start embracing obedience. The moment you release the need to make everything work your way, you begin to witness the beauty of Allah's way. Sometimes Allah will take something from you, not to punish you, but to purify you. He removes attachments that compete for the space only He deserves in your heart. It hurts, but that removal is mercy, because the tighter you hold to what fades, the more it slips away. But when you release it for His sake, He replaces it with something greater: peace, clarity, and the deep knowing that He is enough. Detachment teaches gratitude in its purest form. You stop defining blessings by what you have and start seeing them in what you are allowed to experience, even if only temporarily. You begin to appreciate the present moment without fearing its end. When you love for Allah's sake, you love with open hands, thankful for the gift, yet ready to return it when the time comes. That's the balance between love and freedom. The irony of detachment is that it deepens connection. When you no longer depend on others to fill what only Allah can, your relationships become lighter, pure, and more genuine. You start to give love instead of chase it, to serve instead of seek validation. The heart detached from the world becomes attached to compassion, humility, and purpose, qualities that reflect the eternal within the temporary. And when you finally learn to let go, you realize that you haven't lost anything real. You've only lost illusions. The belief that your security came from something other than Allah, detachment, reveals the truth that you can walk through loss and still be whole, that you can release what is passing and still remain anchored, because belonging to what is eternal means your peace no longer depends on what stays or leaves. You said, faith isn't the absence of fear, it's the decision to trust despite it. Expend it in 8 paragraphs and don't add any ending sentence. Pentamiyar and faith does not mean living without fear. It means choosing to trust in the middle of it. Fear is a natural human response. It reminds us of our limits, our vulnerability, our dependence. But faith is what turns fear into fuel. It's not about erasing the trembling in your heart. It's about directing that trembling toward the one who holds your heart. Real faith is not built in moments of certainty, but in the moments when everything is uncertain and you still choose to believe that Allah's plan is greater than your anxiety. When you look at the stories of the prophets, you see that every act of faith was accompanied by fear. Musa as stood before Pharaoh trembling, yet he spoke. Ibrahim as he stood before fire, yet he walked. Maryam as his faced isolation and pain, yet she trusted. Their courage was not the absence of fear, it was obedience in spite of it. That's what makes faith powerful. It doesn't deny emotion, it disciplines it. Faith whispers, I am scared, but I will still move forward. Fear often grows in the spaces where trust is missing. The more we try to control what we cannot, the stronger fear becomes. But when you hand control back to Allah, fear loses its grip. You begin to realize that fear thrives in imagination, in the what-ifs that never happened. Faith brings you back to the present, reminding you that Allah is here now and He has never failed you before. When you remember that, even fear starts to serve you by pushing you toward prayer. Sometimes faith feels like walking blindfolded through darkness, taking one step at a time, unsure of where it leads. But every step you take in trust builds a bridge you couldn't see before. You don't need to see the entire path, only the next step that Allah is asking of you. That step is where transformation happens. Faith doesn't guarantee the absence of storms. It guarantees the presence of guidance through them. And that presence is enough. Fear teaches you where your faith still needs to grow. It exposes the corners of your heart that haven't yet surrendered. Every fear you face is an invitation to deepen trust, to replace control with submission. Instead of running from fear, bring it into your dua. Let it be a conversation starter with Allah. Say, Ya Allah, I'm afraid, but I choose you anyway. That sentence alone can move mountains within you, because fear confessed becomes fear transformed. Faith also doesn't demand that you feel strong all the time. It simply asks that you keep showing up in prayer, in patience, in perseverance. You may feel weak, uncertain, even broken, but faith is not about how you feel. It's about what you choose. And every time you choose trust over panic, peace over control, surrender over resistance, you are strengthening the very muscle that fear once tried to weaken. The beauty of trusting despite fear is that it deepens intimacy with Allah. You begin to experience His nearness, not in the absence of struggle, but through it, you start seeing His signs in moments you once overlooked, in delays that protected you, in rejections that redirected you, in losses that purified you. What once seemed like unanswered prayers now look like perfectly answered ones, just in ways you didn't expect. That's the quiet reward of trusting when afraid. And as your faith matures, fear no longer becomes something to escape, but something to navigate with grace. You learn to walk through it without letting it define you. You begin to understand that courage is not the opposite of fear. It's faith in motion. And every time you choose trust over terror, you are rewriting your story from one of survival to one of surrender, where fear no longer leads but follows behind faith. Everything in life follows a divine law. What you feed grows, and what you starve dies. Your thoughts, your emotions, your habits, your faith, they are all gardens of the soul. Whatever you water with attention will flourish, and whatever you neglect will wither. Many people wonder why their peace fades, their motivation disappears, or their faith weakens. It's often because they are unconsciously feeding the wrong things. The human heart becomes what it consumes, not just in food, but in focus. If you feed your fear daily, it grows stronger. If you feed your doubts with endless overthinking, they begin to rule you. But if you feed your faith with remembrance, reflection, and prayer, it begins to take root so deeply that no storm can uproot it. You become what you rehearse. Every time you choose gratitude over complaint, you train your heart toward joy. Every time you choose forgiveness over bitterness, you create room for peace to live. Growth is not random. It is cultivated by what you repeatedly feed your soul. Your inner life works like soil. Whatever seed you plant will grow if you nurture it. Whether it's faith or fear, hope or despair, the soil does not discriminate. That's why Allah tells us to guard our hearts and minds, because they are the most fertile grounds in existence. Every verse you read, every word you speak, every thought you entertain is a seed. Over time, those seeds turn into habits, and habits turn into destiny. So ask yourself daily, what are you planting? Feeding your soul means being intentional about what you expose it to. The media you consume, the conversations you engage in, the company you keep, all of it shapes your internal atmosphere. If your inputs are negative, your outlook will be too. But if you surround yourself with remembrance, wisdom, and truth, your soul breathes differently. Light begins to grow where darkness once lived. The state of your heart will always reflect the diet of your thoughts. There are seasons when what needs to die within you must be starved. Some patterns, attachments, and emotions were never meant to live forever. Starve your pride by feeding humility. Starve resentment by feeding compassion. Starve self-pity by feeding gratitude. Starve despair by feeding hope. The process may feel painful at first, but every act of starvation toward what harms you creates space for new growth that heals you. When you feed your connection with Allah, everything else begins to find balance. Prayer becomes more than a ritual. It becomes nourishment. Dhikr becomes water for the heart. The Quran becomes your spiritual sunlight. Just as the body cannot live without food, the soul cannot live without remembrance. When you make feeding your soul a priority, worldly cravings lose their grip because something deeper has already been satisfied. Growth takes patience. The seeds you plant today may not bloom tomorrow, but if you keep feeding them with consistency, they will bear fruit in time. Many give up because they don't see instant results, but faith grows quietly like roots beneath the surface. The transformation may not be visible yet, but it's happening. Every prayer whispered in faith, every temptation resisted, every tear shed in repentance, they all feed a future you cannot yet see. And when you finally look back, you'll notice how the things you once nourished now define who you've become. The peace you feel is the peace you cultivated. The strength you carry is the strength you built through daily feeding of trust and surrender, and the emptiness that once consumed you slowly starved because you stopped feeding it with fear and started feeding it with faith. Healing doesn't erase the past, it transforms the way you see it. Many believe that to heal means to forget, to move on as if the pain never happened. But true healing is not about erasing memory. It's about changing its meaning. It's the process of revisiting the same wound with new eyes softened by wisdom, faith, and surrender. The event may remain the same, but the way your heart holds it changes entirely. When you begin to heal, you stop asking, why did this happen to me? And start asking, what is Allah teaching me through this? That single shift in perspective turns pain into purpose. The same memory that once broke you begins to build you. You start to see Allah's mercy, even in what once felt like punishment. Healing allows you to recognize that every heartbreak, every loss, every disappointment was not random. It was refinement. The wound becomes a mirror, reflecting the strength and patience you didn't know you had. Healing doesn't happen by forgetting your story, but by rewriting your relationship with it. You can look back without bitterness, without resentment, and without drowning in what was. The memory remains, but it no longer owns you. It becomes part of your testimony, evidence that Allah carried you through what you thought would end you. You begin to remember not just the pain, but the presence of divine help within it. That's when healing becomes sacred. There's a quiet beauty in realizing that the same place where you once cried is now the place where you smile in gratitude. Healing teaches you to revisit your past without reopening your wounds. It's when you can remember and still feel peace. It's when the tears that once symbolized suffering now represent release. The memory doesn't vanish, but it transforms into wisdom. And wisdom is what allows your scars to shine instead of sting. Forgiveness plays a central role in this transformation. You don't forgive to excuse what happened. You forgive to free yourself from its chains. Holding on to anger keeps the wound fresh, while forgiveness allows new life to grow around it. It's not a sign of weakness, but a declaration that your heart values peace over pain. When you forgive, you reclaim power over what once controlled you. That act of release is what allows true healing to begin. Healing also requires compassion for yourself. You can't rush it, control it, or compare it to anyone else's journey. Some days you'll feel whole, other days you'll still ache, and that's okay. Allah heals in layers, not leaps. Every prayer, every moment of patience, every attempt to move forward is part of that process. You are not the person who was wounded. You are the person being remade through it. And that transformation takes time. Remembering differently means acknowledging that the past cannot be changed, but the present can be redeemed. What once felt like an ending can become a beginning. The same memory that used to weigh you down can now lift you up when seen through the lens of gratitude. Healing teaches you to thank Allah not only for the joys, but for the sorrows that shaped your soul. You realize that even your pain was purposeful, a means of pulling you closer to Him. And one day, you'll find yourself telling your story from a place of strength instead of sorrow. You'll speak of what broke you with peace in your voice, not pain in your tone. You'll realize that healing didn't make you forget. It made you remember with faith. The scar remains, but it no longer bleeds. It becomes a mark of survival, a sign of mercy, and a reminder that Allah can turn even the most painful memories into the most powerful testimonies. Silence is not emptiness. It is presence in its purest form. In a world that glorifies noise, constant movement, and endless talking, silence becomes a sacred refuge. It's the space where your soul finally gets a chance to speak, where your heart's whispers are no longer drowned by the chaos of life. In silence, you begin to hear not only yourself, but the one who created you. The absence of sound becomes the presence of understanding, the stillness where divine communication unfolds. We often fear silence because it confronts us with ourselves. It removes distraction and exposes the state of our hearts. When the noise fades, what remains is truth, raw, unfiltered, and often uncomfortable. But it is only by facing that truth that transformation begins. Silence teaches you to listen beyond words, to discern what your heart has been trying to tell you all along. It reveals the thoughts you've been avoiding and the emotions you've been suppressing, inviting you to meet yourself honestly before Allah. Silence is where clarity lives. It's in those quiet moments that confusion begins to untangle and perspective returns. When you stop talking, stop planning, stop reacting, your mind finally has room to hear guidance. The prophet often withdrew into solitude, not to escape the world, but to see it more clearly, because in silence, what's important becomes louder and what's meaningless fades. You begin to understand that silence is not passive. It's deeply active. It listens, it absorbs, it aligns. The modern world conditions us to believe that productivity equals noise, that to be valuable, we must always be doing, saying, posting, performing, but silence is the reminder that being is more powerful than doing. It reconnects you to your essence beyond roles, titles, or opinions. It's the moment when you stop performing for the world and start being present with your Lord. In silence, you discover that your worth was never in how much you say or achieve, but in how deeply you connect to what is eternal. Silence also refines your speech. When you practice stillness, your words become fewer but fuller. You begin to speak from a place of awareness rather than reaction. You learn to pause before responding, to listen before judging, to understand before correcting. Silence creates space for wisdom to grow, and wisdom turns ordinary words into healing. Every moment of silence teaches restraint, reminding you that not everything needs to be said, and that sometimes the holiest thing you can do is stay quiet. There's also a silence between you and Allah, a sacred form of communication that doesn't require words. It happens in sujood, when tears speak louder than sentences. It happens in reflection, when your heart recognizes His presence without uttering a sound. It's the silence where surrender happens, where your soul whispers what your tongue cannot. In that silence, Allah listens and you feel heard without needing to speak. Silence is not the absence of connection. It's the depth of it. It allows you to feel life rather than rush through it, to see beauty in simplicity, to sense Allah in the ordinary. When the heart becomes quiet, gratitude becomes natural. You begin to hear the subtle symphony of existence, the rhythm of your breath, the hum of creation, the unspoken praises of everything around you, glorifying the one who made it all. Silence is the bridge between the seen and the unseen, between the created and the creator. And the more you embrace silence, the more you realize it's not an escape from life, but a return to it. The quiet doesn't distance you from the world. It deepens your presence in it. You start moving slower, but living fuller, speaking less, but meaning more, seeking less noise and more depth. Silence becomes your sanctuary, your teacher, and your reminder that sometimes the loudest form of worship is stillness, the kind of stillness that allows the soul to finally rest in the nearness of Allah. Success is one of the most misunderstood pursuits in life. From a young age, we are taught to chase achievements, recognition, and accumulation, to measure our worth by outcomes that others can see. But the moment you begin to question what success really means, something within you begins to shift. Real success is not about how much you have, but about who you become in the process. It's about aligning your definition of success with the values of eternity, not the illusions of the temporary world. When success is defined by worldly standards, it becomes a race without rest. You are always running, always comparing, always feeling behind. There's never enough because the finish line keeps moving. But when your success is rooted in your relationship with Allah, peace replaces pressure. You begin to understand that true success is not achieving everything you want, but trusting Allah even when you don't get what you want. It's measured not in possessions, but in the state of your heart. Changing your definition of success requires courage, because it often means going against the current of society. The world celebrates visibility while Allah values sincerity. The world chases applause while Allah looks at intention. The world rewards outcomes while Allah rewards effort. When you shift from chasing validation to pursuing purpose, you begin to live from a place of fulfillment rather than exhaustion. You stop performing for people and start living for meaning. True success is not about being celebrated by others, but being accepted by your Creator. It's the quiet victory of the soul. choosing patience over anger, honesty over convenience, humility over pride. These victories may not trend, but they transform you. They make you rich in ways that money cannot measure. When your success is anchored in the unseen, failure loses its sting because you understand that even what didn't work out was part of your growth. Every season of life tests what kind of success you truly value. When you lose something, do you still feel successful? When you are unseen, do you still feel worthy? These questions reveal whether your success depends on outcomes or obedience. If it depends on outcomes, it will always fluctuate. But if it depends on obedience, it becomes steady, unshakable, and peaceful. Because success in the eyes of Allah is not about results. It's about remaining sincere when results don't come. When you redefine success, gratitude becomes your constant companion. You start celebrating progress instead of perfection, effort instead of applause. You begin to see blessings in simplicity, in health, peace, prayer, and contentment. The small victories, the quiet mornings, the answered du'as that no one knows about, these become your milestones of success. You realize that real wealth is the ability to be content with what you have while striving for what pleases Allah. This new definition of success frees you from competition. You no longer envy others because you understand that everyone's journey is unique. Everyone's test is different, and everyone's timeline is divinely written. You stop chasing someone else's version of success and start walking your own path with purpose. The heart at peace with its purpose is already successful because it no longer measures worth by comparison, but by connection to its creator. And when your definition of success changes, your entire life begins to reflect it. You work differently, love differently, and pray differently. You no longer chase success for validation. You seek it as a form of worship. Every goal becomes a means to serve. Every achievement becomes a reason to give thanks, and every setback becomes a lesson in trust. Success stops being about what you gain and starts being about how close it brings you to Allah.